If I told you there was one single skill, not a degree, not a connection, not luck, that consistently separates people who build wealth from people who stay stuck, regardless of where they started, would you want to know what it is? Most people guess wrong. They guess intelligence. They guess work ethic. They guess having the right idea at the right time. And while those things help, none of them are the actual deciding factor. The one skill that consistently shows up across nearly every wealthy person, from self-made entrepreneurs to disciplined investors to high-earning professionals, is something almost nobody teaches you in school. It's the ability to sell. Not in the sleazy, pushy, manipulative sense most people imagine. Selling, at its core, is simply the ability to communicate value clearly enough that someone else decides to act. And once you understand that definition, you realize this skill touches absolutely everything related to money. If you want to understand why this one skill matters more than almost any other, hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps. Let's start by destroying the myth around what selling actually is. Most people picture a pushy car salesman or an aggressive telemarketer. That's not selling. That's manipulation, and it's a short-term game that destroys trust and reputation. Real selling is fundamentally different. It's the ability to understand what someone needs, communicate clearly how you or your product or your idea addresses that need, and remove enough uncertainty that they feel confident saying yes. That's it. No tricks. No pressure. Just clarity and trust. And here's why this single skill has such enormous financial impact. Almost every form of income generation requires it in some form. Let's start with the most obvious example. Your job. Even if you've never sold a product in your life, you sell yourself every single day. In job interviews, you're selling your value to an employer. During performance reviews, you're selling the case for a raise or a promotion. In meetings, you're selling your ideas to colleagues and decision makers. People who communicate their value clearly and confidently consistently earn more than equally skilled people who don't, not because they're more talented, but because they're better understood. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that negotiation skill, a core component of selling, was one of the strongest predictors of salary outcomes across professions, independent of education level or experience. In other words, two equally qualified people can have dramatically different incomes simply based on how well one of them sells their value compared to the other. Now let's talk about entrepreneurship. Every successful business, regardless of industry, depends entirely on someone's ability to sell. A brilliant product that nobody knows about or understands generates zero revenue. History is full of technically superior products that failed because the company couldn't communicate their value, while inferior products with strong selling and marketing dominated entire markets. The product matters. But the ability to sell that product matters more. This is exactly why the highest paid people in almost any company are rarely the most technically skilled. They're the ones who can clearly communicate value, whether that's to customers, to investors, or to leadership. Engineers build the product. But the people who can sell that product's value typically capture disproportionate financial reward. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Because selling isn't just about products or jobs. It's about every major financial decision you'll ever face. Asking for a raise is selling. Pitching a business idea to investors is selling. Negotiating a lower price on a car or a house is selling. Even convincing yourself to stick with a long-term investment during a market crash is, in a sense, selling yourself on patience over panic. The skill touches every layer of financial life, not just business. So if selling is this powerful, why doesn't everyone develop it? Because most people associate selling with discomfort. Rejection feels personal. Asking for what you're worth feels arrogant. Pitching an idea feels vulnerable. And so people avoid it entirely, settling instead for whatever income or outcome shows up without ever actively advocating for something better. But here's the data that should change your mind. Research from the Wharton School on Negotiation Behavior found that people who simply asked for better outcomes, salaries, prices, deals, succeed significantly more often than people assume. Most negotiations fail not because the other side says no, but because the person never asked in the first place. So how do you actually develop this skill if it doesn't come naturally? First, practice clarity before persuasion. Before trying to convince anyone of anything, get extremely clear on the actual value you're offering. Vague pitches fail. Specific, concrete value communicated clearly succeeds. If you can't explain your value in one sentence, you're not ready to ask for anything yet. Second, ask more than you currently do, whether it's a raise, a discount, a partnership, or an opportunity. Most people drastically underestimate how often the answer is yes simply because they never ask. Build the muscle of asking small things first, then work up to bigger requests as your comfort grows. Third, study how value gets communicated successfully. Watch how the best communicators in your field explain ideas. Notice how they remove complexity instead of adding it. Read books specifically on persuasion and negotiation. This is a learnable skill, not an inherited personality trait. Fourth, reframe rejection completely. Every successful salesperson, entrepreneur, and negotiator faces far more rejection than acceptance. The difference is they don't treat rejection as a verdict on their worth. They treat it as simply moving to the next conversation. The people who ask the most ultimately receive the most, specifically because they've made peace with hearing no along the way. Here's the truth that ties all of this together. Wealth rarely flows directly to the smartest person in the room. It flows to the person who can clearly communicate value and confidently ask for what that value is worth. Intelligence creates the value. Selling captures it. And the extraordinary part is this skill has nothing to do with where you started, your education, or your background. It's built entirely through practice, repetition, and a willingness to ask for things you currently feel too uncomfortable asking for. Master that one skill, and you'll find that doors open in your career, your business, and your finances that intelligence alone could never unlock. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. And tell me honestly, is asking for what you're worth something that comes naturally to you, or something you actively struggle with? Let me know in the comments.